we're going to talk about Scrum certainly, and I'm also going to share some of the patterns which I found useful and I've seen in many of my projects and programs that I've been running through. So I got introduced to Scrum almost a decade ago, and seen a lot of journey through it. So here we go, and feel free to ask, put down your questions any point in time. Um, as far as one of the recent studies which was done and conducted by the Program Management Institute, PMI, we have seen that one of the drivers of project successes, and this has been actually taken from that report that was, at the pulse of the professional report 2018. And as you would see that some of the driving factors as far as project success goes is the scope creep. And we are in a world, we are in a digitally disrupting world where we have seen that almost every business has now become a tech business. No longer we talk about businesses where it doesn't touch any of the IT side of things. And think about Uber, think about Airbnb, of the world, and you'll see that although they are catering to a specific domain, specific set of our customers, they are more of a tech company. And it's this space and the scope of change, as it says, that it underlines the excellence in project management. And one of the key things that we would be addressing as part of this webinar is essentially how Agile, and for that matter Scrum, and one of the reasons that we have picked up Scrum for this webinar is it's one of the widely used methodologies and framework as far as Agile goes. Another report I can quote is of version 1, which comes every year. And as per the last report, you would see that almost close to 60% of the organizations who are going towards Agile have started with Scrum. And it's this specific scope related issues that you would see getting very well taken care of and well managed, I would say, when it comes to the Agile way of working. And before we start going through our the Agile and Scrum, I would like to quote this story about Nanin. It's one of the Zen masters, and one of the professors had visited China sometime back. It's in the late 1800s, and the story goes that he's there. The professor is there to learn about Zen, and the master says that for you to learn something new, you'll have to first empty your cup. I think we have seen this if you have seen this movie 2012, you would see this happening, right? Where the master goes and pouring the tea into the cup, and so you have to stop. And all we are saying is, if you're new to Agile, if you're new to Scrum, what we're going to talk about here is, possibly, you may say that, this may not work for us, and it's not relevant in our case. And so one of the things I would like to ask all my viewers today is if you can empty your cups, and if you can come with a completely plain slate, and think about that you're just learning a completely new trick about how to work with Agile and Scrum. Having said that, before even we touch Scrum, let's talk about a bit on agility. What's the essence of agility? And one of the methods is Scrum. There are so many others in the world. We have Kanban, we have if you're scaling up, you have Scale Agile. There's so many more, but there's one part, there's one thing which is common across any Agile process, is that these processes are iterative in nature. When we talk about iterative, we talk about multiple learning cycles. We talk about, if you have heard about the plan, do, check, and act, some of the Kaizen loops that we often talk about, which is an iterative way of learning. So you plan shorter things and you learn from what you have just delivered and what you have just given back to your customer, the value that you have delivered. And the other factor you will see across the Agile projects is it's incremental in nature, which means that we are not here to deliver value right in the end. If you look at the traditional approaches, and if I can say fairly to an extent, waterfall based processes, where you would see that some of the value or the functionality, or whatever you want to call it, what we deliver back to customer, the value comes right in the end, right after the 1 or 2 months or 3 months of period that goes by. Whereas when it comes to agile based processes, you will see that the delivery of value is an incremental way. So we deliver things in smaller increments, and each increments adds to the previously delivered value, which means that it has to work incrementally as well. It has to, all your previous things has to work, not just what newly you have delivered. And this incremental way of delivery is what we, typically, if you look at it, we talk about time boxes, we talk about sprints, and within those time boxes, we have to, kind of create these increments. And it's a highly collaborative way in which the teams start doing things. They are focused towards a common goal, is what we call as the collective ownership and the collective responsibility. And if you really think about this word of Scrum itself comes from the rugby game. I mean, the huddle that they have. And if you look at rugby, we always compare the agile and the Scrum way of doing things versus the waterfall way. And if you think of waterfall, we always refer to those as the relay race approach, where we talk about, even if you have Usain Bolt in your team, for that matter, and you know where he usually stands. He stands in the last 100 meters. And someone like you and me are running, I believe, we'll still lose the game, because we are not fast enough. We won't be able to finish our 100 meters, the first 100 meters or the second ones in time. And for that matter, if we drop the baton, it's all gone, right? But when it comes to Scrum, and of course the great game of rugby, you will see that it's everyone's duty. If you have the ball in your hand, you run. You just go to the other end and score points. If there's someone who's coming to block your teammate who's with the ball, you block that person. So that's how the game goes, and that's where we talk about Scrum. And as I said, when it comes to waterfall, it's a losing game. If you think about it, the way the agile projects and processes have been, kind of capturing the market, or teams and organizations adopting to it in the last 10 to 15 years has been phenomenal. We particularly feel, it's probably the death knell of waterfall way of working. And for precisely the reasons that the value comes too late. And unfortunately, when things come in late, your risk increases. Just think about it. We are all stuck with the the COVID situation that we are in. And if you were working in a waterfall, and if you just keep saying that to stick to the timelines rather than improving your new way of working. I've seen a number of places where, especially it's true with IT, right? You would have seen people go try to work from home. IT perfectly fine, they have been doing like that before, but there are so many businesses who had never looked at this model, and now they're doing it. So it brings in some amount of agility, where you just simply cannot follow a plan. And waterfall, to an extent, tends or believes that you just think about following the plan and probably deliver the value. Agile, to an extent, is those shorter iterations, those shorter goals, and the incremental way of nature with which we are iterating in each sprint and trying to deliver. So definitely, if you look at it with agile, waterfall simply doesn't stand a chance. Talking more about Scrum, and as I said, Scrum is the one of the most widely adopted frameworks when it comes to agile. And these are our two gentlemen, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. They introduced us to the world of Scrum back in 1995. So if you thought about the manifesto and the principles that came somewhere around 2000 2001, there were teams, and there were places where Scrum was already being implemented. And as it says, it's a framework for people to address complex adaptive problems. So again, it's not like a silver bullet for each and everything. It's not that all right, our rivals, our competitors are doing Scrum, so let's do Scrum. So that's really not a good a reason for you to really go and adopt. Maybe there's already a process which it's perfectly working well for you. But essentially, coming back to the change that we started this, the topic with, where we said that if you are looking at too many changes happening into your projects, ad hoc changes, the business possibly doesn't know what they want, and you're working in that kind of a complex environment where you are supposed to still go and deliver value. That's or those are the projects, I would say, where you would see a lot of value coming from Scrum. So Scrum has been there, as I said, 1995, so it's good 20-25 years now. And as I said, in the last 10 to 15 years, it has really picked up well. But one of the things which I particularly find amazing, and sometimes it pains me, is when it comes to this maturity of agile processes and agile way of working. You will see a lot of teams just doing what the framework talks about. It will talk about the practices, the roles, the ceremonies, the different artifacts that you have to do, and it's just like bookish. I particularly feel that it's very visible. You'll see a lot of Kanban boards. Of course, that's important. We're not saying that's not supposed to be done, but what we mean by if you're doing most of those, um, it's what we call is doing Scrum, and where we really want people to, or teams, to understand the power of agile and power of Scrum, is building this mindset, and building upon the values, the principles that it stands for. It's invisible but powerful, so think about it as the iceberg, right? And it takes years. It takes years for groups and companies to really have this mindset across the board. I've come across sometimes, there are groups where maybe a couple of teams have been doing agile, and it's not been even adopted by across the board, but suddenly they feel that everyone is agile to an extent. So these mindset, if we are able to percolate these values and principles way into the team level, into each and every individual, and when they start retrospecting, introspecting, and thinking about how we can improve further, how we can deliver value quickly. Okay, the artifacts and the practices are there, that they will help you to do that. But more importantly, keeping customer at the center, thinking about what value we are delivering, those are more important, right? And that's the reason why I particularly feel that understanding the Scrum values are also essential. And when it comes to Scrum, we talk about teams being very open in nature. They should show openness about what they're doing. uh, be open, be if you have failed somewhere, be open to admit it. Have the courage to pick up more, have the courage to change the status quo. If you see teams who are saying that, okay, well, if it's not broken, why fix it? That's sometimes a philosophy a lot of teams have. And it's, but we are in a constantly changing world, so we want teams to be more courageous, to start picking things, or go and start doing new things. A lot of things we hear about today, we hear about machine learning, AI. There's so many new technology aspects coming through. So unless you are courageous, you won't be able to, really, be able to deliver value in a way where your customers are, really happy or delighted, I would say. Respect for each other, keeping focus on what you're doing, and eventually, committing to what you or the team feels, or the each and every individual for that matter. There has to be that commitment. So these are the five values when it comes to Scrum. And if you really think about Scrum as we call as the house of Agile or the house of Scrum, you can look at it, right? There are three big pillars to this. One is transparency. Again, delves back into some of the openness that I talked about. Be very transparent in nature in terms of what you are achieving and what's happening within your teams, and always look at the way the value has been delivered within your shorter time boxes. Inspect on what has been done, and if there is something that can be improved on, be it the product, be it the process, you should adapt to that and try to inculcate what you have learned into your next cycles. And when I think, when essentially you would have heard about the agile world as shorter sprints. It's an empirical process. The reason why we have shorter sprints is you need to, the team has to learn from their past experience, and that's what we mean by it being an empirical process, right? So unless the teams really have these values right where to their bone, and really focus on these, you won't really feel or see the value come out of this whole process, this whole framework of Scrum. uh, let's talk about the framework itself, since I've been mentioning it for quite some time now. And uh, it's the whole framework in one slide, as you can see, right? And it's as simple as it gets, or you may find it a bit complicated as well. But all in all, it starts with a vision. It starts with the vision of the product, and there are some roles. So I'll be talking about some of the roles that Scrum introduces us. And the vision is what results into the product backlog, which is an ordered list of items, ordered list of stories, you can say, the user stories, requirements written from the end user perspective, also called as user stories. So the stories are what forms the product backlog, and it's an emerging thing. It doesn't happen on day one. The product owner prepares it to an extent where he feels that the team can start with it, and then as the team is working on a day-to-day basis on those stories, it would emerge, right? So that's the one of the roles of the product owner, to formulate the product backlog. And once the details are there, once the items are there to a sufficient detail, that's when the process of Scrum, or the time box, or the sprint starts. It starts with the sprint planning, and this is the planning session where the team comes in, decides on what is it that they can pick up for the current sprint, and they formulate the sprint goal based on what they have decided. Once they have started with, or thought about the goal and formulated it, they track the work as part of the sprint backlog, and on a daily basis they will come and meet, discuss about how the progress is. And at some point in time, maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, depending on what the iteration length, the sprint length that they've picked up, they are going to produce a potentially releasable product increment. So the whole point here is, we're not working on bigger chunks, we're working on smaller chunks of the whole big product. And that's what we mean by the product increment. And now that this increment has been produced, it's now time for the team to demonstrate what they've done. And we go into a meeting called as the sprint review, where the product is demonstrated. The demonstration is given to your stakeholders, to our customers, and obviously, looking at it, they may give some additional enhancements you can think about, or improvements to the product, and those improvements go back into the backlog, reprioritized, and the whole process would continue. One of the things that also happens in terms of how are we inspecting and adapting, is the sprint retrospective. So all these are actually there to help or improve on the way that we work. It's retrospectives are more from the perspective of the last sprint that has gone by, what further can be improved on. So let's talk about some of these roles a little bit further, because it's the people who drive this framework. It's the people who produce the value, and it's essential that we understand what these roles are about, right? One of the key roles in Scrum is the product owner role. And you can think about this is a representative of the business. He's more of a proxy to the customer. And this is the person who is the one who is envisioning what the product should do, how the product should look like, what product will produce the value that we have to deliver back. So he creates a product vision, and that vision, as I said, gives rise to the backlog itself, with all the details that are there as part of the stories. And since he's the one interacting more with the external world as well as the internal teams, so it's one person you can think about, who is kind of partly dividing his time between the interactions with the outside world, getting what is to be implemented, and with the internal teams, seeing how they are doing it. So the what is something which belongs to the product owner. That's what he defines. Once, as I said, the team, the product backlog has sufficient details, The development team will get into, and of course the entire the all the different people that we have as part of the group, as part of the team, they come in a meeting called as the sprint planning. And the dev team essentially then decides the how are we going to achieve the what. And this is a team which we feel that you should be formulating or forming these teams with good T-shaped people. When I say T-shaped, which means that there are people who have, of course, they're good in one of the technologies or one of the skills that they have. They are masters into that, right? So they have depth in one of the, at least one, but then they are also aware of the other factors. So the generic skills, you can, so if I were to say, maybe you are a Java or a .NET or a Python developer, so you have good depth in that. But then you also know about maybe some database changes, maybe some amount of testing that you can do. So think about it. So it's more like a T-shaped person who knows multi things but good in one, at least one thing. All right. Now this is the team which we believe should be self-organized. Self-organized from the perspective that the product owner gives the what, as I said, the stories or the requirements, and the team should now decide how they will achieve it by being more self-organized. By it's more about, rather than the order taker mentality, like that's the old way of working where someone tells you to do and you just do that. This the other way around. Here we just give them the purpose, we just give them the vision, we just tell them what is it that the end customer would like to see, and let the team think about how it can be done. Now of course, it all happens with a prioritized set of lists. It's not that you want the team to go and work on the least important items. So it's never the case. That's not what we mean by self-organized, right? It's more about the priorities determined by the product owner, but the way they want to achieve is left to the team. And it all happens in a very collaborative environment. As you would see that in most of the cases, at least in my experience, I've seen that initially when we form these agile teams, we don't have T-shaped people. We have to an extent developers who will only do development, testers who probably only just do testing. And you would see that these are to an extent internal silos, and we want to really break these silos even within our team. And there are a lot of techniques that we usually do as coaches, or even as the next role which I'm going to talk about is the Scrum Master role, where they help the team to gel together, to come and work together and work in a very collaborative environment. And this is the team which will eventually produce the increment of the product. And as far as the Scrum guide, you would see that a maximum of 9 people is what is recommended. The only reason being, just think about it, the more the number of people and each one communicates to each other, right? I mean, that's what is expected. You would see that the communication channel really grows exponentially the moment you have more people within your groups, right? So a close group, we would say, a small team really works well and tries to produce the results. The third role is, of course, the Scrum Master, and this is one person who understands the process. He knows about Scrum. He should be someone who is very adept at the Scrum way or the Agile way of working, and be the coach to the team, and someone who is more of a person connect. That's what we feel. I mean, someone who enjoys working with people, someone who enjoys believing that the growth of people is his own personal growth. The growth of the team, what the team achieves is his personal mission. So we also refer to the Scrum Master as the servant leader. They have a lot of leadership qualities, but they're there to serve the team, that they're there to help the team remove the impediments, and as I said, make the work more visible. And in my opinion, to an extent, this is the person who should be helping the team improve on their productivity, improving on their way they deliver, the way they work, improving on quality, technical aspects, you name it. I mean, this is your go-to guy. You need some help, you should be looking at the Scrum Master. So in my opinion, it's kind of a very difficult role to play. And especially these days, of course, we are all stuck at homes, and just think about it. Someone who's remotely trying to help you out, it becomes even difficult, right? So uh, All in all, Scrum Master is the one who is helping the team to focus on the goal. They have a goal to achieve, in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the sprint cycle. And you would often see, there's so many disturbances that come along, right? I mean, you would see teams getting completely swarmed by all other requests, ad hoc requests, and also you need someone to help the team out and stay focused, right? And that's this guy, the Scrum Master. uh, let's talk about some of these meetings. I'll be going through some of these a bit quick, because I think during my earlier things I've talked few things about it. But uh, sprint planning, when it comes to, it's one of the most important meetings, because that's where the whole sprint, the whole time box starts, right? Is the start of the time box. And this is where you would see that the product owner is actually talking about the what, the stories, as he understands, he or she. And the team then understanding, from that understanding what they have, they now start determining the how. So they don't start doing it. It's more like a discussion that happens within the group, within the team, along with the product owner. The Scrum Master is there facilitating this meeting. And a lot of things would happen in this. They may try to estimate how it is to be done, for each of the stories. uh, Determines how the user stories would be completed, not just from the implementation perspective, but also maybe the testing that is required, the test scenarios, maybe some algorithms. There's so many things that get discussed. So this is an important meeting for any team. Even if you spend a whole day doing this, if you're just starting with Agile and Scrum, do it. Uh, this is an absolute must, or a meeting where the team should really spend a lot of time. And the output, or the final thing that comes out of this meeting, the sprint planning meeting, is your goal. So what really matters is that goal now. And the goal is just like you can just put like a simple statement, or few sentences, which talks about what is it that the team is going to achieve. And it doesn't matter how you achieve it. You may have thought during the planning that maybe we would do certain activities, or certain things to achieve that value. And when you start doing it, you would see that, yeah, I think during the planning we made some assumptions, but they're not true anymore. So let's change the direction, let's change. So whatever it takes for you to deliver that value, to achieve that goal. And that's what where we see that the team should actually commit to that goal. So once the planning is done, you would see on a daily basis the team would actually come and meet together, and everyone is going to talk about what has been the progress for that person, for that individual. He or she would talk about what is it that I did yesterday, and it's all it's just time box to 15 minutes, so it's not too long as such. There were days when we used to think about, or what would want these teams to be co-located, and that's where we used to stand up. And nobody really likes to stand up more than 15 minutes, right? I mean, that's why it got kind of limited to that 15-minute cycle. And this is where the team, every member will talk about what is it that they did yesterday to progress towards the goal, and anything that they're going to do today again to meet that goal, and if there's anything that is impeding. So if there's something impeding, the others could possibly help. And in case if 15 minutes are not enough for you, there's always what we call as meet after, or you think about offline meetings, as we say, right? So discuss those beyond those, after those 15 minutes. But these ones are kind of restricted to 15 minutes for the stand-ups. The review, again, it's also called as a demo. It happens to the end. And once the increment is produced, once the product increment is done, the team demonstrates it back to the stakeholders. It should meet the what we call as the acceptance criteria and the definition of done. So once everything is done, they demonstrate it and possibly get some feedback around what they've done. And one of the last meetings that happens as part of the 2-week or the 3-week sprint is they do a retrospective. This is the end of the sprint as such. And there are things that the team discuss. What has happened, how did we go about in the last 2 weeks, what process did we follow, Is Scrum working for us? You can even think about it that way, right? So what happened? And more importantly, what needs to really come out from this is how can we improve? What can we do differently in the next sprint? So it's all about improvement. It's all about those Kaizen loops and Kaizen cycles, right? So this is one meeting which I particularly feel is absolute must for everyone, and Scrum Masters should really drive the teams through this meeting and ensure that there are some new things being learned every sprint. So if you look at it, right, I mean, those were the roles and some of the meetings, the ceremonies, as we say in Scrum. Let's also talk about some of the patterns. What you would see most of the times. There are teams who have not been doing agile, so they start with Scrum and agile, and they say, okay, fine. How can we improve on the productivity of the teams? So what's really important when it comes to improving your way of working? And what we have found is, there's one thing which I have particularly seen, that there's a tendency sometimes that teams are not stable. There are some members in the team who are just there for maybe a couple of days, and then they get pulled for some other activity, or they may be allocated to multiple projects, and this is where you will see a lot of issues. There's a study which is done where we say that the stable teams, they are more productive and they are more predictable if the team stays together for a longer duration of time. It's not just about the 2-week sprint, it's more than that. So if the team is there with you for the entire product duration, maybe it goes on for for a few months to a year, or maybe more than that, so be it. You will see a lot of good things happening with stable teams. They are more predictable, as I said. Another pattern which you would see that how should we as Scrum team predict the amount of work to be accomplished in the sprint? So where do we start? How do I know, or how does the team know what is it that we can pick up in the next one, in the sprint that we are just starting? Okay, so think about it. So we always refer to the stories being estimated with story points. It's more about comparing one work to the other with story points. Yeah, and the story points becomes something like, just as I've shown here in the backlog. Let's say you had initially planned to do so many stories with those story points, but eventually in the sprint you could only manage to finish the 8 and 5 and 5. So the ones which are almost done isn't done. Almost done means something is still remaining, and that should not be considered. That's not a good reason for us to actually extend the sprint. So what is done is finally what's considered. So just think about it, that a team just comes into the new sprint planning for the new sprint. They should always look at what we have done in the previous sprint. So if you have achieved somewhere around 18 points, maybe that's a good starting point where you can start picking things somewhere around 18 points and see how it goes. And a small tip here is, in case if you have been doing it for quite some time, then the last 3 to 4 sprints data you should look at. What's the velocity, how much of story points the team has been able to achieve, and on an average, just see how much it has been done, and pick that as the measure for you to predicting how much to pick up. So velocity or the story points, what the team achieves, is not mainly to look at the why we failed in some cases. It's more about how we can use that measure to predict something in future. It's all about future predictions. Think about it that way. And one of the last patterns that I would also like to discuss before we open for any questions is, it's a very standard one. You'll see happening even in every team. You'll see, right, where they say that our team gets a lot of ad hoc and unplanned work, along with the new development that is expected from the team. And how can we deal with this unplanned change? And I think some situation which we all go through, right? Here again, what we feel is, your product owner, because they are the ones who are getting a lot of things from their stakeholders. The team should always determine that what is the thing that comes in our way. What new things are really sucking up some of our time. And always that add that buffer as part of your sprint backlog. When you start the sprint, think about it, right? That you say that maybe 70 or 80% of the time we are fully occupied with the new work, but then some 10 or 20% of our time goes into maybe support issues or something which is unplanned. So that 10 or 20% is what we refer as buffer. Always plan for that buffer. Now the thing is, okay, what happens if nothing comes, no ad hoc work comes during that sprint, so that's great. If you don't have any ad hoc work to do and already have accounted for some buffer, you are in a good spot, because what you can now do is utilize that buffer that you have. Maybe you want to pick some more sprint, maybe you want to pick some additional stories. It's not that often there's a debate that happens that, okay, aren't we changing what we're supposed to do, aren't we changing the goal? Yes, possibly, but it's always better that we keep progressing. It's always better, so it's always, you should pick more if you can, or maybe utilize the buffer for you're doing some automation or improving some other parts, or something around it. Maybe you can use for documentation as well. That's what I would recommend. But the buffer is something which you may look at. And again, uh, don't look at the last sprint, in my opinion. Look at the last 3 or 4 sprints and see what's the average time that is being spent for this ad hoc kind of work, and then plan for your buffer. So all in all, Scrum, you will see a lot of patterns. Some of them this topic is so vast. We can also think about some lot of anti patterns which you should be not doing, right? But it's more about an introduction to Scrum framework, and you know it's the change that we're going through. And this is one thing which you feel you should really look at, because it's going to change most of the projects going forward. You would see that the people would be adopting to agile process.